Today, we're going to be talking about how to create satisfying character growth for your sleuth in a cozy mystery. We'll discuss the 2 issues your sleuth needs to face in your novel, how to weave them together into one believable and compelling story, and 3 specific plot points that will really sell your emotional storyline. Hi, I'm Jane, and when I'm ready to write a new book, instead of thinking about plot and character arc, I like to think about acute issue and chronic issue. Okay, maybe this makes me sound like quite the diva. Why can't I just use the terms everyone is familiar with? Well, I like acute issue and chronic issue because I think they help us understand the relationship between these 2 elements of the novel. They are both problems being faced by the protagonist, and they relate to one another in a very specific way, as we're going to see in a famous story, The Christmas Carol. A chronic issue is a problem of long standing. In The Christmas Carol, Scrooge's greed is his chronic issue. He doesn't even realize it's a problem for him, but it undoubtedly is. It is robbing his life of joy and closing him off from the people around him.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle Scrooge. God save you.
Merry Christmas. Humbug.
An acute issue is a problem that's happening right now, which demands action. When Scrooge learns that he's going to be haunted by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, that's an acute issue. And the relationship between these 2 issues is very simple. The acute issue gives the character a reason to finally face up to that chronic issue and conquer it. When we're writing a cozy mystery, we've got a shortcut because our acute issue is usually going to be the same for every book. A murder occurs, and the protagonist feels compelled to solve it. Let's spin up a few chronic issues that we might expect to see in a cozy and see how they pair up with this acute issue. And just for fun, let's arrange our whole structure in Mad Lib form. Here's a chronic issue we might expect to see in a cozy. Once there was a woman who was disillusioned with romance following a divorce. One day, a murder occurred and she felt compelled to solve it. This forced her to spend a lot of time butting heads with a handsome police detective, therefore she changed and opened her heart to love. Or perhaps, once there was a woman who lacked confidence and could never stand up for herself. One day, a murder occurred, and she felt compelled to solve it. This forced her to recognize her talent for investigation, therefore she changed and became a confident, full-time investigator. Or what about, once there was a woman who had a painful relationship with her twin sister. One day, a murder occurred, and she felt compelled to solve it. This forced her to work alongside her sister, therefore she changed and rebuilt her relationship with her sister. Do you have to have a chronic issue to write a publishable cozy? Not strictly. I have read cozies that were successful, enjoyable, engaging, and honestly didn't have that much of a chronic issue. But to me, as a reader, this is the thing that is going to elevate a book from a story I'm going to read once and forget about to a story that's going to stay in my heart. Give me a thumbs up if you're liking this video so far, and then let's take a look at a couple of mystery movies and how they connect their acute and chronic issues. In Gosford Park, our protagonist is Mary McEachran. She's been newly hired on as a lady's maid to the Countess of Trentham, and her chronic issue is that she is out of her depth. She's being underpaid, underappreciated, and she's having difficulty juggling the constant demands of her job. She travels with her employer to a weekend house party, and midway through, a murderer strikes. From then on, Mary can't help theorizing about the identity of the killer. She'll learn that the victim, Sir William McCordle, impregnated a number of female servants over the years and fired those who refused to give up their children for adoption. Although he told the women he was placing their babies with nice families, in fact, he was just dumping them in an orphanage. When Mary learns that Mr. Stockbridge, one of the visiting valets, is one of these abandoned children, she theorizes that he's the killer. But he isn't. Oh, he stabbed McCordle all right, but there's very little blood because before the attack, McCordle was already dead of poison. He was murdered by the housekeeper, Mrs. Wilson, who is Mr. Stockbridge's mother, although he doesn't know this. She was forced to give him up years and years ago. Now, having figured out his identity and what he intends to do, Mrs. Wilson acts to save him by committing the murder first. He can't hang if all he did was stab a dead man. At the end, Mary confronts Mrs. Wilson and asks her how she knew what Mr. Stockbridge intended to do.
What gift do you think a good servant has that separates them from the others? It's the gift of anticipation. And I'm a good servant. I'm better than good. I'm the best. I'm the perfect servant. I know when they'll be hungry and the food is ready. I know when they'll be tired and the bed is turned down. I know it before they know it themselves.
This gives Mary the clues she needs to understand her job better and, more importantly, understand how to handle her employer. So here's how this plot fits into our structure. Once there was a girl who couldn't handle her new job. One day a murder occurred and she felt compelled to solve it. This forced her to confront the killer and learn from her. As a result, she changed and became better equipped for her job. So it works. Solving the mystery helped Mary change. But this is a kind of minimal example of what we are shooting for here. Gosford Park shows a tangential relationship between chronic issue and acute issue. It's basically two stories proceeding separately that intersect just at the end through the use of dialogue that has meaning for both stories. This may be all you need to make your book come together and leave readers with a really satisfied feeling, but I do think that we can shoot higher. Let's look at a mystery where the chronic issue and acute issue are constantly interwoven, and that's Who Framed Roger Rabbit? In the world of Roger Rabbit, human characters live and work alongside living cartoon characters known as toons. Cartoon programs aren't hand-drawn in this world, they're filmed, just like any other show. Our protagonist, Eddie Valiant, is a private eye who was hired to spy on Jessica Rabbit, the wife of kitty cartoon star Roger Rabbit. Eddie's chronic issue is that he is grief-stricken and joyless, following the murder of his brother, Teddy, by a toon. Eddie and his brother used to love working with the toons, but now that Teddy is gone and a toon is responsible, Eddie has hardened his heart to the toons. He wants to have as little to do with them as possible. But Eddie will have to change his ways, beginning with a plot point that I like to call the challenge accepted, which is all about the sleuth making an emotional commitment to solving the case. Roger has been accused of murder and is about to be arrested by the evil weasels who work for the movie's villain, Judge Doom. Eddie makes the first of several choices that will push him toward resolving his chronic issue. Instead of turning Roger over to the weasels, he protects him. This will require him to spend the rest of the movie hanging around with Roger, enduring exactly the kind of madcap hijinks that he has closed his heart to in his grief. Eddie and Roger pursue the case, but while Eddie's busy confronting a suspect, Roger is kidnapped and taken to Toontown, where most of the toons live. This presents Eddie with a second difficult choice. If he's going to save Roger, he's going to have to enter Toontown, which he hasn't returned to since his brother was killed there. So to continue pursuing this case, he will have to confront his grief directly. I like to call this beat Go the Hard Road, because it usually involves the character doing something they've previously been absolutely unwilling to consider. Eddie walks his hard road, enters Toontown, and rescues Roger, but they end up in hot water again in the finale. Roger and his wife are tied up and about to be murdered with a hose full of paint thinner. Eddie has to rescue them by incapacitating the weasels who are guarding them. It's previously been established that if the weasels laugh too hard, they'll die. So to save the day, Eddie has to fully embrace the joy and merriment that he's been closed off to. He clowns around, performing a song and dance that the weasels find so hilarious they just can't stop laughing. He absolutely knocks them dead. In each of these three plot points, in order to get closer to solving the case, Eddie has also had to get closer to solving his own chronic issue. In The Challenge Accepted, he chose to emotionally engage with something that brings him pain, working for toons. In Go the Hard Road, he chose to cross a barrier he previously believed he would never cross. And in the finale, his transformation becomes complete. And here's the structure of his story. Once, there was a man who was grief-stricken and joyless. One day, a murder occurred, and he felt compelled to solve it. This forced him to engage with the things that once brought him happiness. As a result, he changed and recovered a joyful spirit. All right, let's take a look at one of the storylines we spun up at the very beginning of the video and ask how we'd use these very same plot points to weave together our protagonist's acute and chronic issues. Let's look at this one. Once there was a woman who had a painful relationship with her twin sister. One day, a murder occurred and she felt compelled to solve it. This forced her to work alongside her sister, therefore she changed and rebuilt her relationship with her sister. Okay, we're going to hammer out our three important plot points, but first let's just flesh out that chronic issue a little so we understand it better. What's the beef between these two women? Well, let's say there was a serious breach of trust in the past. Maybe the sister is the good girl of the family, while our sleuth is a bit of a screw-up. She's the wild child Jessica Wakefield to her sister's straight-laced Elizabeth. Maybe the sister turned her in for some youthful indiscretion out of concern, but it had disastrous results for our protagonist, and she's vowed never to trust her sister again. The first important plot point we're going to talk about is the challenge accepted, and is where our sleuth makes an emotional commitment to solving the case. Generally, it happens at about the 1/4 mark in our manuscript. All right, how can we make our acute and chronic issues intersect here? Well, perhaps our sleuth's sister has a big piece of the puzzle that is this investigation. Let's say a teacher at an elite boarding school has gone missing and our sleuth wants to investigate because she knows the teacher and cares about her. Well, Our sleuth's sister also works at the school and knows everyone involved, so she could give our sleuth a lot of information. In fact, maybe she's actually the principal, and so she can hire our sleuth to take the place of the missing teacher, enabling her to nose around. Our sleuth doesn't feel great about teaming up with her sister, but it's the only way she's going to get close enough to crack the case, so she agrees. The two women will investigate and butt heads until the 3/4 point in the book, which is the perfect spot for the plot point that we call Go the Hard Road. At this point, just like Eddie Valiant, our sleuth is going to have to break through a barrier she didn't believe she'd ever be willing to cross. We've already established that her biggest problem with her sister is trust, so maybe at this point she's going to have to make a huge leap of faith. Maybe our sleuth has been doing something slightly illegal to make money on the side, and in the course of this subplot, she's uncovered info that's relevant to the investigation. In order to crack the case, she's going to have to put her illicit info together with what her sister knows about the people working at the school. So she's got to come clean with her sister. In fact, she's got to sort of deliver her fate into her sister's hands by confessing her illegal activity. This is hard for her to do, but by this point, solving the mystery and finding the missing teacher is way too important for her to walk away from. Then we come to the finale of our book, and here is where we really put our sleuth to the test. She figures out who the villain is and confronts him, but in the confusion, he takes her sister hostage. She has to decide, will she rescue her sister? Doing so means risking her own life, but she does it anyway. Making this decision will force her to come face to face with how much she really loves her sister and how much the time they've recently spent together has meant to her. So here's what our 3 plot points look like on our graph. These 3 are some of the very first plot points I put together when I'm planning a book, along with the catalyst, which gets everything rolling, the midpoint, which shakes the story up halfway through, and the all is lost moment, which hands the protagonist a big defeat and sets her up to go the hard road in the last quarter of the book. Now, we've got one more thing that we've got to deal with, because since this is a cozy mystery, we can expect to write a book 2, a book 3, maybe even a book 8 or 12. So what do we do when we're ready to design those books? Are we going to break our sisters up so that we can go through it all again? Maybe we need to give our sleuth a new chronic issue with the same weight and magnitude. Maybe we'll allow the sisters' chronic issue to govern the next book. Well, I think we've got an awful lot of options here, and while there's too many to go into in this one video, I will say that you don't need a character growth storyline of this magnitude for every single book in your cozy series. It's great to kick off the series with one, and you might want to have one at strategic points along the way. But many of your books can be governed by smaller storylines. Still, I do think that every mystery deserves an emotionally resonant storyline that puts your characters on full display. And that's going to involve hitting these plot points we discussed. I'm going to be going into this further in a future video, talking about a few different ways that we can construct character-driven storylines that don't necessarily need quite this much character growth. But first, we've got to wrap up this series with something I think that we're going to have a lot of fun with. Last week, I polled you guys to ask which of 3 cozy hooks you wanted me to develop in a video about my entire process for planning a book. As of this recording, the Ghost Hunter hook is narrowly in the lead, which is such a relief because I had nothing. I had nothing for the runner-up, which was the bed and breakfast hook. But for Ghost Hunter, I've got some cool ideas for that one. So that will be our next video. Planning out the bare bones for a Ghost Hunter cozy mystery. I've had such a fun time in this series, digging into clues and motives and all the rest, and in the next video, I'm going to be bringing it all together. Plus, we'll be talking a little bit more about story structure and scene planning. If you don't want to miss that, this is a great time to subscribe. Check out.